I hope everybody out there is having a beautiful weekend. This is Woman 360. There's a lot that happens in the world of the woman, but then, as we always say here on the show, whatever has to do with a female has to bounce off a man, has to bounce off a male. And together, of course, they make the community and the nation at large. Of late, we've been seeing a woman being replaced when you talk about sex. People have been getting dolls, they've been getting robots to replace her, but that prompted what we are talking about today. Are women being looked at as sexual objects in our community? Or who is to blame for this? Is it the female herself? Is it what the community is thinking? Or is it just what the world looks at her as? I have very interesting guests in studio. I have a conscious musician, B-Flow. I like to call him Brian, or if I don't call him Brian, I'll say Flow. I can't do that. Do that for me.
Just B-Flow alongside Judy.
You see, I cannot do that. And I also have a social commentator, the beautiful Susan. We'll be chatting with this guest, and we're going to also have a psychological point of view of this topic. We have a psychiatrist in studio with us. We want to get into the mind of people who do this, as well as would say the victim of this. How does the woman who is actually being portrayed as the sexual object feel? How does that affect her? And the ripple effects of this, of course. So we'll get right into it. I'm going to ask the first question in regards to the notion of women being regarded as sex objects. What do you guys think? Anyone can take it. Ladies first, maybe. I can see
gender equality.
At you, Susan.
I was rather hoping he would take it first, but I have never been known to say no to this beautiful opportunity. I think your question is, does society portray a woman as a sex object?
Yeah.
My response is yes, definitely. And the only problem that I have with that question is that to some extent it limits what society perceives human beings as. Okay. If men look at women as sex object, where does that place a homosexual man? Mm-hmm. Because they then perceive another man who they are attracted to sexually as a sex object. So in general terms, I would say yes. And this is based on a number of factors. One, the fact that when a man looks at a woman, he sees certain things. And I know that most of the times when we have this conversation, and I've had it a lot with my friends, it always borders on misogyny. Mm. It's always about, oh no.
Speak English, misogyny.
Okay, so it's men who regard women in a negative way, in a way that they just look at them in an aggressive way. And that is more in a sexual way. So instead of looking at a woman as just, when you look at me, depending on where you stand, you may be looking at me as, oh, I would marry this girl. And I mean, I walk around town and people tell me, oh, look at you. We don't need to buy a mattress. And these are just, you don't know me. I'm just walking in the streets and I get a comment like that. Clearly, that person is looking at me as a sex object. They're not looking at me as maybe
how do you react to such?
I don't even react at all. I don't even grant or dignify such comments with an answer, because that speaks to who that person is. My point here, though, is that when you look at society and how we look at each other as human beings, we are sexual beings by nature. And sometimes we spend so much time arguing around semantics and feeling that once someone objectifies you, then there's something wrong. There is everything wrong to that. Only when you look at different things. For instance, if I go to look for a job, can I be accorded a job on merit rather than the fact that I need to offer a sexual favor or someone is attracted to me? Or should someone with less qualification who's not as competent as I am get a job because they are more sexually appealing? I think that is where we begin to have challenges. But generally, I would agree that yes, women are perceived as sexual objects the same way that men are.
Okay. B-Flow, would you agree to that? Or maybe society looks at just a portion, a particular type of women to bring themselves out as sexual objects?
I think that generally society, our society, Zambia to be specific, has been objectifying women quite a lot. And the moment you ask the question, my mind already goes to even places which are supposed to be very respectable, places that are supposed to have people full of integrity. A place like the University of Zambia, for example, they have what they call the Monk Square, where ladies don't even want to pass there because of certain remarks that will be passed by the monks that sit there. Maybe they'll talk about the way she's dressed. Even if she's dressed appropriately, maybe they'll still talk about just the way she looks. They will mention something about her body and what they would do to her and all these things. So that just leads to the fact that definitely women are being objectified and they're being looked at as sex objects. We come back to the music industry where I belong, and
I was about to say that the music industry, artists, musicians put women with.
It's one of the places or the areas or the sectors where you find women really being objectified in all angles. You look at it from the point of view of a dancer. When people want to make a music video and they bring all these dancers, they've undressed them, but the artist is very fully dressed, and the dancers are half naked and they're there. It means there's a reason. The reason they've put them in that space is because they want the audience to imagine certain things and, you know, stay glued and make sure that they watch the action, and what happens after that, I don't know.
So is it true that sex sells?
Well, it does. It does, and that's the strategy. According to what I know from my colleagues, that's the strategy to say you need to give people what sells, and they say controversy sells, and I believe that sex in that sense is definitely controversial.
Susan?
I'm sorry, I really like what Biflo just said, but I think there's always an aspect, when we talk about sexuality, there's always that aspect that we miss, and it really bothers me.
Which one do we miss?
What we miss is the contextualization. Let's talk about last week. Last week was Nchwala. And what did we see? I think that's like a nudist party.
Others would argue it's tradition.
Thank you, and that's where I'm coming. So Biflo is describing an entertainment scene. We're talking about a musician. It's the way that society has constructed sexuality. Because that's our culture, it's normal for people to walk without shirts. We saw so many young women without tops walking around. We saw men completely naked, I think with just they left very little to the imagination. It's acceptable because that is culture, and that is who we are. It represents where we come from, and you cannot sexualize that. In the same way that you cannot see a woman breastfeeding. I know that over the years, we've had a huge debate around women breastfeeding in public and people complaining about that. When you see a woman with a baby breastfeeding on a bus, for instance, people frown on that. But that speaks to the high level of sexualization of our society. Because when you look at the breast as a feeding organ, you stop looking at it as that. You look at it as a sexual organ. And therefore that makes you uncomfortable, when in fact it shouldn't, because for that baby, that's a tool from which it feeds, and it shouldn't be something that a woman should now cover up and hide in a little corner. She should be able to feed her child comfortably.
So who are we shifting the blame to? Are we saying, because I always post the topic on our social media page, Woman360 on Facebook, like it and give us your thoughts. And already the comments that were coming through were that sometimes women themselves come through with this, I mean, if I've got a lower top which is like this and I'm wearing something that's very short, all I'm trying to hide is literally the private parts. So there's an argument that's coming through with some of the comments is that women themselves are the ones to blame because they push that I'm here, see me, sexual agenda kind of thing.
But I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that at all. And that's why I talked about contextualization. I think women are supposed to be able to express themselves comfortably, and that is where it becomes a sexist agenda, and people begin to accuse certain women of being feminists simply because we do not agree or subscribe to certain schools of thought, and that in particular I don't. Women should be able to express themselves. If I want to show my cleavage, it's fine. That's me. That's who I am. That I should not be stopped because some man is going to feel a certain type of way. That man should learn to put his feelings and who he is in check, because that's what makes us human. The same way that we had in Nchwala last weekend, people were nude and whatnot, it was okay. Today, you cannot walk to Chipata without a shirt, like right this minute, because the context has changed. So you can't dress that way to church.
Biflo, your thoughts on that one? Who is to blame? Who's making, is it society, is it the woman? Who's bringing this agenda to say, she wants to look at me in this way? The thin line between being sexy, classy, and attractive.
Well, I think somehow everyone is to blame, because I think that the woman should also now become cautious of the fact that society has all these crazy notions going on, and therefore if I am going to a particular public place and I'm looking like this is how they will react. For example, you won't go to Kamwala dressed in a certain way when you know that in the past people have been stripped naked there for dressing in that particular way. So if you're going to go to that place, I think somehow you need to have that at the back of your mind. It's the same as passing through the same Monk Square, because you know that if I dress this way, they will pass these remarks. So when it comes to that one, I would say I actually don't have a problem with a woman expressing herself and appearing the way she wants to, because I think everybody has a right to look the way they want, as long as it's not against the law in our country. But then society has become...
Do you think this is an issue NGOs, specifically those representing women, should come into and talk about?
Yes, because currently they are not talking about it. In
our concluding remarks, guys, I want you to comment on the issue of when a woman is getting into marriage, marriage is just about to take place. There's the issue where a woman is taught not to say no to have sex with her partner. And there's this thin line of maybe sometimes if the woman does not agree to go ahead with this, at the time you don't feel like, taking on this marital act or sex, the man would maybe even mentally torture you to say, if you don't want, I'm going to get somebody else. And what we talked about earlier, or no, get a door, a sex door, something like that. The thin line. Yeah. Your comments on that?
Personally, I think that we'll need to revisit those kind of teachings and just consider the fact that it's not all the time that a woman will be ready for sex, or it will be tantamount to sexual violence, because if you're going to force her, then you're violating her rights, you're violating her sexually, and it's just not right. So we might need to revisit that part.
Okay.
Some of the traditions that we have, though they've been norms for a very long time, we cannot overlook the fact that some of them are very wrong, and we just have to try and challenge them and try and do things better.
Okay.
I would say there's something called marital rape. So if you force yourself on your wife, you actually could be prosecuted and arrested and dealt with in line with the law. So just because someone is married doesn't mean they have to be violated. However, I will also add that when we discuss marital issues and our cultural teaching and practices, there's a tendency for people to exaggerate what culture provides for. I do know that even within the cultural teachings, I did a lot of research around traditional ceremonies and girls' initiation, that there are limits and there are times when women are told they should not actually have sexual relations with their wives. And you agree with me that in recent times we've seen that most of the marital disputes and grounds for divorce that have come about are people saying, oh, I asked my wife to do A, B, C, D. She refused, and she said they did not teach her to do that. So even within, we need to also appreciate the fact that there are also certain, things within our culture that safeguard women, and that they're also taken out of context and say, oh, because you're my wife, then I can have sex with you anytime, anywhere. That is not what our tradition provides for.
All right. You've been fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
But one last thing. We always say beef flow. Yeah. I know it's brand Wembia, but where did the beef flow come from?
So, by virtue of being brand Wembia, it means that the B is already flowing, brand Wembia. Then the flow came from, the praises that you get from people for flowing very well, where every time after a talent contest, people would say things like, hey, I love your flow. I love how you flow. That was a tight flow. And I never really understood what they meant at the time. So I would ask, like, what do people mean when they say they love my flow? They say, because you have this tongue, like you're flowing like water. I'm like, oh, okay. That sounds like brand can flow. So brand flow.
Beef flow.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so let's just hear something from Beef Flow. Join me on the other side. We're going to hear how he is going to flow. This is Woman 360. Be part of the conversation by going to our Facebook page, Woman 360. Like it and give us your comments.
Mama, you the genesis of my story. Why should you be absent in victory? Mama, you the genesis of my story. But why should you be absent in victory?
You are watching Woman 360. We are looking at the issue of women being looked at as sex objects. What do you have to say on that? Give us your thoughts and comments. Let's just go for another interlude as I prepare to speak to two of my other guests, psychiatry practitioners coming from Chainama Hospital here in Lusaka. Thank you so much for still staying with us. This is Woman 360. Mr. George Tafuna and Mr. William Piri, thank you so much for coming through. We want to get to know the psychological part of what we are talking about today. So with you, I'm going to start with issues of poverty, low self-esteem, upbringing of this female, or maybe even attention seeking, depending on the character of this person. Does that have to do with anything of a woman trying to portray herself in this manner? Attention, poverty. I'll be mentioning them maybe for you, for the sake of your comments. Poverty?
You see, it's diverse. I'm just going to say that there's diversity in terms of how we can look at this topic. Okay. And for any action or any behavior from humans that is going to be portrayed or displayed on the table, it means there should be a root cause of it. No behavior just exists from nowhere.
So someone can't just want to look nice and sexy and classy? No.
No.
Okay.
I'm going to say no in the sense that you're going to realize that there is evolution. If we are to go back some 2 decades ago, you're going to see that there's some drastic change if you're to compare now and 20 years ago. Okay? What society is going to consider normal here in Zambia, in another country, they'll consider it to be abnormal. So it's out of our culture and values that we have. That is going to shrine to say this is normal, this is abnormal. And when it comes to sexuality, there's what we call sexual perversions. And sexual perversions will also describe what sort of behavior the person is going to present with. That society is going to consider to be normal. Okay. Like in this country, homosexuality, we don't condone it. Okay? And when we look at this perspective, who is to blame? We are going to blame everybody. One, we are going to blame the person who is also showing those signs that are abnormal to society. Two, we are going to blame the person who is also an onlooker. So, by and large, you can consider it to say the way how someone wants to look, it's what is going to give them their self-esteem. And which is okay. Which is okay. Because if I want to wear these trousers, and when coming to this studio, I'm comfortable, and I should feel comfortable. I cannot wear something that makes me uncomfortable. In that way, it means I'll have a problem. And that problem that is going to arise is low self-esteem. So even ladies, they should feel comfortable what they want to wear. And you don't have to subscribe to anybody. And there's no law in this country that says you're supposed to wear like this. And I think we need to draw a line there.
Okay. I always like to do a bit of research before I get into a topic, get views from other people. Again, via our Facebook page, people have been commenting to say, someone gave an example of, you know, when you're walking around town or an area where there's a lot of, you know, cowboys or people who do business around town center, you know, someone just says, hey, your sister, or, you know, touches you or passes a comment in regards to what you're wearing. A lot of females fail to respond or say anything towards that. Even Susan Mwapa, as I was talking to her earlier on, she says, if someone tells me that, someone passed a comment to her and she failed to respond to that, how then does a female or a person respond to such comments, making her feel like she's a sexual object?
first and foremost, we have to look at personality. If you look at personality, you talk of long-lasting characteristics of individual that form up behavior. So you find that our behavior is as a result of what we have developed with. You discover that from social learning, we learn a lot of things that mold us. So if a person goes in town, they pass a comment, that means there's a development, there's an ethical thing that we need to abide to as Zambians, which has been abrogated due to different aspects. It may be due to modernity. We copy from outside. Most of the things we are copying without even knowing the source. Then it can also be through the experiences that we have gone through. You talked of poverty. You find that most women have in some sort of not abiding to what they are supposed to be, because they are earning a living through, I would say, sexuality. We have seen people lining up on the roads trying to ask for people that can give out. But those people who want to give out, they cannot just give out unless there is something. So you discover that women reduce themselves to be more or less like dolls, because what they want is a man who will come, propose, and have what their gratification, and they go. There's no even interaction or what we can call relationship. So in such, it makes women lose their respect on themselves, and immediately that respect is lost, they will take it as something that is normal. So those are some of the things that we should look at when we talk of the mind.
Okay. So how then does the woman try and help this situation of being looked at as a sexual object in the way that she carries herself, and how does this affect a woman?
You know, behavior itself describes who you are. Because if I'm in town, or a lady walks in town, as we said earlier, and then somebody just tries to touch her butt, honestly, it describes what sort of a person you are, the one who is even touching her. Because a well-disciplined and cultured man, I don't think, in as much as a woman is dressed in a certain way, you do not have the right to sexually assault her by touching her. Because that's an assault, of course, by just doing that. Okay? But at the same time, we need to realize where we come from. And we are Zambians. We are not in Europe. And we know our cultures and values. Because certain things, for sure, they've gone to the extreme nowadays. I was listening to what Bifro was saying. If you have to look at most of these music videos that come out on Trace, Channel O, you are going to appreciate the fact that the one who is more exposed, it's a woman, than the owner of the song, well dressed, but women are everywhere. And that in itself is going to describe what we are talking about, that they are being looked at as sex objects.
But how does this affect the woman?
You see, in terms of...
Please. It will affect a woman because a woman is a model. If you understand the nature of a woman, she is a mother.
True.
And if she says anything at home, children are able to follow. Fathers, it's very rare that they are there to discuss with the young ones. So if a mother is destroyed, that model will be transferred to the children. And we expect that our offspring will be wasted. So a woman is very important in the development of children. And of late, I would say, how many divorces did we have last year? We are talking of 28,000 divorces. So what model are we giving? We are giving that marriage is nothing. Then the man psychologically will be convinced that I can even marry a doll and I will just be satisfying myself. That's all. You see?
Is the woman still being looked at as the weaker sex?
Definitely, the men will still consider, and society will still continue looking at them in that way, unless we change the paradigm shift, where there is a woman who's going to look at themselves with that high self-esteem and respect. Why I'm saying this is that when you look at what is happening right now, some of the women, not all, are lazy. They don't want to work. All they want to do is, okay, there is this new hairstyle that has come. There's this new dress that has come. They have no means. Okay, they have no means of how they're supposed to strategize how they're going to get that hair. They don't have the means. So the only thing they are going to think of, where is John? He's the one who's going to provide everything. And John is going to give you the money, but at the end of the day, you need to pay back. And if it's to pay back, it will be in terms of sex. And for sure, the end result that will be there will be the issue of, well, I get what I want from her, and I give out what she needs. And it ends there. And he'll just call, oh, where are you? I think it's that time again. Okay?
Agreement. And
that's exactly what is happening in society. And we cannot run away from this. And it is happening big time. And a man will not even think of it, and that's how women are perceived as sexual objects. Because at the end of the day, all they want, some of them, is to get fast money and in exchange of sex. And for sure, if a man needs sex, definitely, it's a matter of a phone call away. Oh, where are you? I think I need just to see you. You know, there's a song for, is it, there's a song
by the Zambian
artist, Dani, I think it's done. It's supposed to be done, Kaya. Yes, it says something like that. Okay? Won't you come and see me? Something like that.
But you know what you want in
exactly. So that's one way of even showing that women are being considered as sexual objects, which is not supposed to be the case. Women are highly respected human beings, and in terms of behavior, they are better than us men. And the way we act totally differentiates. Because if you're even to go into town, just take just few statistics, you go in town, you see the kind of behavior that is being portrayed by men compared to women. The ones who are busy even with vulgar language are men. Okay? But at night, what we are seeing, for example, in these roads, we are going to see that a big number of women now are parading themselves. And that's a sign. And sex is not now respected. If a man wants sex, will just go and then get it wherever he wants to. But that will not be health sex.
Just beside what he's saying, you know, of late, the love has gone out. I have had interviews with some of the women in my at my workplace. You ask them, they want to get married. You ask them, do you love the man? No, but just the age, I think I should get married. You see? Why is he getting married? Because it's of the age, not the love.
So the love does not play a part.
It's not playing a part. Others, they will say, I want a car because my friends are driving. So they will get into that home not because of the man, but because of the car. So now this man also will marry that woman just because of gratification, not because of the love they have. You see? So that's what is happening now. That culture where some time back the parents can play a role in marrying their children has gone out.
We'll definitely continue talking about things that happen in society, hoping that everything can change and get to the better. Gentlemen, thank you so much for coming through once again. I appreciate it.
Thanks. Thank you.
This is where we end our show for today. A big thank you to all our sponsors and everybody involved in making this show a reality. On behalf of the entire Woman 360 production crew, I'm Judy Ngulube.